back. Mary Lou, graduating from afters, you ended up working for a number of different stations in commercial radio, Tamworth and Townsville. How did you end up at the ABC on the Sunshine Coast? That's a pretty sought after position for any kind of radio announcer.
Well, I had dreamed this job into existence. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah, so manifesting it. This is where I'd like to do. This is what I'd like to be doing. This is where I'd like it to be. And all of a sudden, there's the opportunity.
I didn't know I was going to be on the Sunshine Coast. Yeah. That was the icing on the cake. I had always thought that the ABC needed a mature age Triple J, because music lovers at a certain stage, the music on Triple J doesn't suit you anymore.
Leaves you behind. You leave it behind. Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's still a lot of people like me who love adult contemporary music and alternative music and a lot of the great stuff Australian bands are doing.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere for us. Internet radio, most of that kind of stuff is from the States. So there was nothing for us. And then I discovered this radio station called ABC Coast FM with 2 stations, one on the Sunshine Coast and on the Gold Coast. And I discovered them because they were advertising for a presenter music director. Now, I was a music director. I loved being a music director. I'd been offered jobs in commercial radio, but if being the music director wasn't part of the job description, I would turn them down. So this is my dream job.
It's a very much of a niche position in commercial radio as well as a music director, because there's not a lot of choice about what you're going to be able to program in that job, is there?
No, it's very prescribed. Yeah. I realised why we never got commercial airplay when I was playing in bands.
Once you're on the other end of the story.
When I was the music director deciding what would go to air, but I wasn't deciding what would go to air because it's a very strict format. I would have a music call every week with our music consultants, and they would pretty much tell me what to play based on all their call-out research and figures. That was it. It's all based on numbers and research.
Yeah. But having said that, you work with people that have been in the industry for many, many years, and the ability to learn the craft of being a radio announcer and a music director is just a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, and I did learn a lot in commercial radio. I worked very hard. I worked very long hours, insanely long hours in Townsville, but I crammed a lot in, and that held me in good stead when I came to the ABC, because they said at the time, we like people who understand the ABC culture, but also have the discipline that comes from working in the commercial world. And I certainly had a lot of discipline.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So, and the fact that it was on the Sunshine Coast, wow, it was just perfect.
Couldn't have been any better.
No, I was so happy.
And then all of a sudden, one day, a management decision made perhaps many thousands of kilometres away, and all of a sudden everything changes for you at the drop of a hat again. Somebody else makes a decision on your behalf with no intent of that having any actual impact on you, and the changes that come towards you at 1,000,000 miles an hour are almost devastating.
Well, I never thought that I would get treated the way that the ABC decided. They did apologise later, bless their cotton socks. Yeah. But at the time, it was very, very tough to be told that management were going to be in town, and all the big managers, and visiting both stations. It was an organised attack in a way, both stations at the same time, and they wouldn't tell us what it was about. But the bottom line was we were getting restructured. I'd been there less than a year. And I was astounded, because in commercial radio you hear about horror stories of people getting sacked and marched out and all that kind of stuff. But I thought the ABC would treat people differently. And for the most part, they do now. I think this might have been a bit of an experiment for them, and we were just the unlucky ones. But to be told that you'd have to reapply for your own job and there were no guarantees was a bit of a tricky one. Now, I did get some very good advice at the time. I was told to make use of any help that was offered, and the ABC did offer us a lot of help from the Human Resources Department, which was great. And this friend also said, restructures happen. There are 3 things you can do. You can either stay and resent it, you can leave, or you can go with it. And he said a lot of people who go with it, who accept it fully, will often end up with better jobs. And that's actually what happened to me. I ended up as a music director for 2 stations instead of 1, and I ended up with a better salary. So ultimately something I thought that was really bad turned out to be good.
The ability to embrace change like that, though, it's very hard. By very nature, I think humans are fairly resistant to change because this is how I understand my life and I like it this way.
And especially when it happened to us in such a way.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was going to be good news, you think they would have told us before they landed on the ground.
At least a little bit of fanfare,
Yeah.
rather than a funeral dirge, although you didn't hear the funeral dirge on its way, did you?
No.
No. So amongst all this maelstrom, all of a sudden, here you are at a 10-day meditation retreat. What was in your mind? What were you hoping to achieve by shutting yourself off from the world and putting yourself into this environment, giving yourself up to a bunch of people who were going to tell you how you were going to live, and not only that, but how this was going to change your life for the better?
Well, I did end up with a better job and more money, but then the manager who was put in place turned out to be a real problem. So my dream job actually was my dream job again, even more so. But I just couldn't get on with this manager, and clearly he felt threatened by me. So it became more and more troublesome and tough. I wanted to keep my job very badly. I wanted to keep my job, and I had to work out a way in which I could deal with him. Now, I had spent a lot of time in 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and the rest. And while I was there...
Have Radio Managers Anonymous?
Oh, I wish. But I was told something that revolutionary to me. I'd been brought up in a Christian household where you're supposed to change other people. You're supposed to convert other people to being Christian. It's the one true religion, etc., etc. So I was brought up in this culture of it's our duty to change other people. When I was in 12-step programs, I learnt you can't change other people. I was shocked. Really? I thought I was supposed to. You can only change yourself. So I went to this meditation retreat hoping to be able to keep my job that I loved, despite this manager, by changing myself. And that's why I stayed, even when it became very hard and extremely physically painful. I stayed because I wanted to keep my job. I loved it.
And I mean, it's a wonderful read, and it's part of the reason why we're here to talk about this book, Sex, Drugs and Meditation. Looking back on that time, the actual physical pain of sitting, meditating for hours at a time, trying to quieten an overactive mind while you're being advised to just concentrate on the breath as it makes its way across your top lip. While looking back on all these amazing ups and downs in your life that have led you to this point, you leave a retreat like that having accomplished what you'd hoped to, or is it still a work in progress?
It's always a work in progress.
Yeah. I mean, you've been back many times since.
Yes. But what I got out of this first retreat was so life-changing, which is why I wrote the book, because I used to love reading the case studies in self-help books.
Yeah, of course.
And I realised that what had happened for me was like one of those case studies, that I had gone through, if you like, the hero's journey and come out the other side. Through these 10 days, I realised why I had so many problems with my manager, what it was about me, the way that I react to things all the time, and that knee-jerk reaction instead of having that space to think things through properly, about how I've always resented being told what to do. And more importantly, that I'd seen my managers, my bosses, as my parents, and I had wanted them to love me because my parents never did. So I'd put every manager I'd ever had in an impossible situation. But more than that, something very surprising happened, which I wasn't expecting, which was a very toxic relationship that I'd had previously in my 20s, and I'd done a lot of therapy around. I'd worked the steps on in 12-step programs. That came back when I was sitting silently in meditation with all the force of the betrayal and heartbreak that had been evident when it first happened, and that shocked me. So I got the chance to actually have a look at how I've done every single relationship in my life as well. And that's the thing, if you meditate in silence over 11 hours a day for 10 days, all kinds of things just bubble up from underneath.
There's nowhere to hide. There's no television, no radio, no music to silence the thoughts in your mind, are there?
No.
Yeah.
So you go to some pretty amazing places. The teacher describes it as a surgical operation of the mind, and that's certainly been my experience. So I actually less than 2 weeks after I left that meditation retreat, met the man that I would actually marry. And that's directly as a result of what I learnt in that 10-day silent meditation retreat.
It's amazing how it comes around so quickly. So, I mean, we're talking about that, and you're already working on another book that pretty much continues on from the end of this book, going back to the ABC. How do you write a book that includes less than flattering tales about your relationship with your bosses while still working in such a mainstream public organisation? Is it well received? Does the ABC have a way of dealing with the fact that this particular employee is, because there's lots of authors who work within the ABC, and the ABC have their own publishing division as well, but do they have a way of saying, oh, okay, we better batten down the hatches because Mary Lou's book's coming out next week and she's going to be on the news and everybody's going to be talking about when he was here? How do you deal with that? How do you work your way through that process?
Well, I do find it interesting that it's not stocked in any ABC bookstore.
Well, not yet.
But apart from that, look, the ABC is a wonderful organisation, and I did kind of float it by the head of the legal department in a hypothetical fashion ages ago. And he did say to me, look, the ABC is in the business of free speech. We're not in the business of suing people. Now, what else can you tell me about this hypothetical book? And I went, oh, nothing. But ABC management up to this point have been genuinely pleased because they know how much time and effort I've put into my writing. I took 6 months leave without pay to write a novel that doesn't work. And anything you do for the ABC, you actually have to put in an external work request and it needs to be approved.
For doing this today?
Yes,
yeah.
For everything.
Yep.
So with a book, I put in my external work request and I got the most glorious email back from my state manager saying, we're all so happy for you, the big wigs included, because we know how much you've wanted this. And I've had nothing but support. And I think that's a genuine example that the ABC do stand by their word, that they are about free speech. A lot of people have said to me, well, a few journalists have said to me, how are your listeners at the ABC going to respond to this? I mean, this is a fairly graphic book.
Because I was going to say you haven't held anything back. You've obviously kept things to yourself about that you feel a little less comfortable about talking, but there's no hiding the fact that you admit to heroin use and drug addiction and problems with alcohol. It's very confronting, not just for you, but it is for your friends and for the people who have an idea when they listen to you on air who Mary Lou Stevens is, and not only that, but who they want you to be.
Yes. And it did cross my mind, and it's something that my husband and I really had to take into consideration before I signed the publishing deal, that I may lose everything. You know, I might lose my job. My family may never speak to me again. My friends may never speak to me. I might get sued and we'd lose the house. And I often think that the things that we're scared of losing are the things that limit us, that hold us back. Yep. So we just went, let's do it. And the overwhelmingly positive response has been proof that yes. Say yes once again. Just say yes and do it and see what happens. And the response that I've had is that our listeners love me even more. And they feel as though they really know me. They know that I've gone through a struggle now. Before they might have thought that my life was just perfect and I had this dream job. But they know that I've struggled, I've had problems. It makes me more of a person and even more relatable. And that is the feedback that I've got from our listeners. And I bless them for it.
And you know, the reviews have been glowing. Everybody loves the book. And you're in the middle of this never-ending travel bio of publicity tours and interviews with bald guys on community television and all those types of things. And the reaction to it is overwhelmingly good, and you're already getting ready for your next book.
I am. This one does have a happy ending. And so the next book is the truth about the happily ever after.
Are you a radio announcer that writes books on the side? Are you an author who happens to work in radio?
Well, I was a radio announcer before I was a writer.
Yeah.
But I was writing songs before I was in radio. Yeah. I like to think that I'm a communicator, whatever form it takes, whether it's writing a song or being on the radio or writing a book or whatever it is. I really love connecting with people in whatever form it takes. Working full-time and writing can be a bit of a stretch sometimes, but I love it. So I'll keep doing it. I can't, and I need to keep my day job. I can't afford to quit the day job, so I'll keep doing it. And I'm very fortunate that I have a job that I love.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mary Lou's book is called Sex, Drugs and Meditation. This brings us to the end of the first season of Turning Points. You'll find each episode on 31 Digital's YouTube channel. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook. I'm Shaun Bindley. Thanks for watching Turning Points. I'll see you again.